figuring things out. All right. So it's 7 p.m. We'll just wait a minute or two more, and then we'll get started. Maybe you guys want to put something in the chat about what you're hoping to learn.
Well, Cynthia, could you turn off the waiting room? Because I think it's still active.
I can't figure out how to do that. I saw it before, but now I don't know where it is.
I could just keep letting people in except that, you know, when I'm talking.
Yeah, which.
Yeah, I can keep admissions until I start to talk.
If could a participant or two just put something? Oh, here you're typing. Oh, great. Do we have a handout? Oh, we don't have a handout, but we're recording the video. Yeah, you'll have access to it. What else? Looking to replace the grass in the front yard and live in Stockton. Nice and hot. Good. Okay, so I'm gonna start now. This is our, you are at the North San Joaquin Valley CMPS. We've just restarted our chapter in the last year, and we're really excited about, you know, becoming really active in our area. We're starting this webinar series. This is our second event. We're gonna hold them typically the second Monday evening of each month. This one, of course, is Monday, September 12th. 2022, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. You know, we can stay a little longer if people have more questions. The next webinar is Monday, November 14th. So we're skipping October because of the CMPS conference in San Jose. We're sure everybody will be busy with that. And we're skipping December because of the holidays. So this is me, Cynthia, and feel free to contact me at that email address. If you have an idea for webinar or you want to be a speaker, anything, just let me know. Okay. Oh, I forgot to turn on the, did I turn on the recording? Yeah, I did. I'm sorry. We're new. We're new at this. Okay, here's the agenda. So I'm just gonna, I got 3 slides here. And then Mike Azevedo is gonna just talk about our chapter, a little bit about our chapter and all the fantastic things that we're doing. Then we have our guest speakers, Christoph Kamensky, and I will tell you more about him right before he speaks. The event is being recorded, and our website is not exactly up to date right now, so watch our Facebook page for where the recordings are going to be and the new webinar announcements. We are working on, our website, but it's not there yet. So our first webinar was August 8th, Biodiversity in the California Native Plant Gardener, with a very well-known Arvind Kumar, who's been on the board of CMPS a very long time, friend of mine, and it was just a fantastic talk, and that has been recorded, and you can find the link in the Facebook events page for that if you want to go see that. Then today is Reliable California Native Plants for a Garden with No Irrigation, which will be KK. November 14th, Planting and Growing a California Native Plant Garden with Carl Hill, who's the owner of Blossom Hill Natives in Oakdale. And January 9th, highlight of great nature-based day trips in San Joaquin Valley. We have Dr. Jeannie Knapp, who I met when I took the California Naturalist program. February is still open, and March 13th, in anticipation of wildflower season, we will have Cynthia Gingerich from, originally from the Santa Clara Valley CMPS Society. Also, she'll be talking about creating gorgeous flower arrangements with California native plants, and she has done many, many, many of these, and she has a lot of photographs, and that'll be really exciting for all of you who grow wildflowers in your gardens. Okay, so now I'm going to pass this to Mike. Mike, you want to take the screen?
Yeah, I'd like to share a screen if that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think somebody's already, is that you sharing right now?
Yeah, just take it.
Okay. So we'll stop. Yeah, okay, got it. All right, does everybody see that? Do you see that?
Yes,
Yes.
we do.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that. All right, hi, I wanted to give you an introduction to our chapter, the North San Joaquin Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. In the years before COVID, our chapter had already kind of fallen by the wayside, which is really sad. It used to be one of the most active chapters in the Valley, as I understand it, but a very strong chapter requires a big effort on the part of a strong core of volunteers, and things had just quieted down until they practically ceased to exist. Right before COVID hit, a meeting was held to reinvigorate the chapter. That was in January 2020, so that's timing. And now, as COVID is waning, we are full steam ahead on getting this chapter back to being active. And here we are with our second in our series of virtual presentations that will allow us to learn more about native plants around our house. You will soon be hearing from Cynthia about the wonderful list of presentations that she's lined up already over the next few months, and we plan on keep it going. Recently, we had a tabling events at La Loma La Loma Pollinator Festival, the Patterson Apricot Fiesta, and the Stanislaus County Fair. We've been collecting names and emails of people locally who are ready to help us promote the use of native plants as I'll be talking about. The California Native Plant Society is obviously a statewide organization, and you can join it for a regular individual membership of $50 to receive Flora and Artemisia magazines. Get benefits such as discounts at certain nurseries, sales and such, and the ability to join 2 different chapters of CNPS. So obviously we hope that you join us here with the North San Joaquin chapter and whichever other chapters you feel a kinship with. I said the membership was $50, but there are lower dues for people who are on a reduced income and higher membership levels for those who are able to help the organization more financially. It is a great cause. To go to the membership online, it is just cnps.org/membership. So it's fairly easy to remember. One of the things we've been working on is our new newsletter, the first in years. And the first one went out just last month. Volume 1 of the Oak Branch has been sent to all of our members via email. I should point out that we intend to do everything by email. We recognize that there are some people who actually prefer US mail, and for those who are inconvenienced, we do apologize, but we don't yet have the financial or volunteer base to put it together that way. We've decided to save some trees and remain electronic. If this is a true problem, just let us know. The Oak Branch has a number of informative articles on native plants, subjects, photos, information about local events and happenings. It goes out to all of our members, and you should have received it if you are on our lists, but some people somehow got missed. So please let me know in chat if you have a problem and didn't get the newsletter, or if you have any other questions or stuff like that, let us know in chat. We want this particular newsletter to go out to everybody. Now, we also have a lot of people who have expressed interest in native plants, but who haven't joined us yet, and we hope to keep you in the loop as well, so that perhaps you can actually join us for an event or two and to remind you that we are here. So why care about native plants? I was asked that question recently. What's the deal? Isn't this just a hobby? No, we are finding out more and more each day about the true need to restore our environment as much as we can. The man who has been trying to explain the need for native plants with the most eloquence is Doug Ptolemy, a professor from Delaware. He's written 3 books on the subject, all of which circle around the theme that we have been damaging the environment dramatically, but there is hope in native plants. 95% of all birds feed insects to their young. Caterpillars are an important component of that diet, and caterpillars cannot live on non-native plants for the most part, with few exceptions. Native plants are critical to the ecosystem, and a backyard with no native plants, and that is a devastatingly high percentage of them, are ecological dead zones. Planting native plants in our yards helps moths, butterflies, native bees, and other pollinators, and therefore birds, and the web goes on and on. Our cities need not be devoid of butterflies. For more information, I want to point out that this is actually a slide showing about a video you can find on YouTube. This was actually a presentation that was given to the California Native Plant Society in LA. And that was in February of 2018, Restoring Nature's Relationships with Douglas Ptolemy. If you look that up on YouTube, you will find an hour-long presentation that really goes into it. He's a wonderful speaker, and he makes it, when I got done with that, it was like, it hit me like a brick. So I'm hoping that everybody gets a chance to see this video. So please go ahead and take that screenshot and watch that video if you've never got a chance to see Douglas Ptolemy. So, since we have been ramping things up, we have been holding field trips, but we expect to really pour it on this coming year. And as we come into fall, we will be concentrating on the fact that fall is the time to plant native gardens. They are very successful if you start by seed or in the fall or by planting new plants. And we have a native plant sale coming up on October 22nd. And we also want to point out that Sacramento is holding a plant sale coming up as well. We'll be pointing out events coming up to demonstrate the art of installing native plants. Again, all of this is in the newsletter. And if you, so make sure you let us know if you would like to get a copy of the newsletter and didn't get one. We expect to send out our next newsletter in November that will keep talking about your fall and winter gardens in order to, and then in the spring, we reap what we sow. We'll look at wildflowers and have field trips galore. We need volunteers to take on certain positions on our executive board and on various committees. We hope to have a project crew who can learn the ins and outs of planting native plants, maintaining them, and that can help us set up native plant islands, demonstration gardens, butterfly habitats, and around the Central Valley. With so much habitat wiped out by agriculture and development, it is high time we put things back. And this is just the organization to do it. We need a conservation committee that looks at local issues and advocates for native plants. We need an event committee to help us create an enviable and varied list of things to do and places to go, including so many wonderful locations that already exist around our area. We need to do more tabling events to let people know what we do and educate everyone on the need for native plants. There is so much we can do, but it takes people and effort. And with that in mind, I want to tell you about, at long last, we finally have an in-person social gathering on our schedule for Saturday, September 17th. That's this Saturday at La Loma Native Garden in Modesto. We'll be gathering to socialize and plan and strategize and sign up for things and figure out just exactly how we can make all of this wonderful stuff happen. It's a wine and cheese social with all the information in the newsletter, which, as I said before, let me know if you don't have it and I'll be happy to send it to you. The photos I'm showing you are of the garden. Well, I'm not showing you any photos of the garden, but during the spring, it's a beautiful garden, La Loma Native Garden in Modesto. And I hope you can join us on September 17th at 6:30 p.m. You can, as far as what to bring and things like that, just let us know if you're interested in coming and we'll be sure and give you the exact instructions. With that, I'll turn it back over to Cynthia and I will be in the chat for those with questions and comments. Let's see. Yeah, I think you're on mute, Cynthia.
Sorry, Mike, would you put in the chat where people should email you to get on our mailing list and get the newsletter? Mike?
I'm sorry, you were asking me a question?
Yes. Would you put in the chat where people should email you to get our newsletter and?
Yeah, of course, I'll do that.
Okay, all right. Okay, so next I'm going to introduce Christoph Kamensky, who is our speaker tonight. We have a long bio of him. I might just do a few of the highlights because he's going to show you his garden, so I won't go into all of that. But he's a longtime member of CNPS Santa Clara chapter, Santa Clara Valley chapter, and one of the founders in 2002, and a continuous team member of the Growing Natives Garden Tour. Is now called Growing Natives Garden Tour. Right. And actually, I was one of the founders too, and so I've known him for a long time. He's got a fantastic garden in the hot, dry, partially sloping San Jose lot. It's an acre. He's been gardening there for 24 years. It's been on the tour many times. So he's also a designer, developer, and webmaster of the gngT.org website. If you haven't been on that website, please take a look. There's 264 different gardens on that website with videos and photos and plant lists. It's really amazing. And most of these gardens are in the hot, dry, little water type of environment that applies to many of us. Okay, so I'm going to stop now and let KK take over, and he's going to talk about reliable California native plants for a garden with no irrigation.
Thank you, Cynthia, for the introduction. Let me first start with sharing my screen. At this point, you should be seeing the same picture that was in my background, a bunch of Fremontodendrons and the Cyanotus in front. And now I need to switch to my presentation, which is going to happen in a moment. Okay, there we go. Just a second. Yeah, now I can work. So first of all, thanks again for the introduction. And now I'm going to talk about my experiences in the garden in San Jose in my backyard. It's about 1 acre total, planted, about 95% natives. What you see here on the first slide is the backyard 3 years ago or so in April. So it's a little bit colorful. And now with plants that don't get any irrigation in summer, one thing that people are going to be always worried about is that they are going to look pretty bad in the season that they are not actively growing or blooming. Well, and that is true. There are some plants that are not that great looking, but there is also a lot that are fairly reliable and look good most of the year. Now, it certainly looks, nowadays, it looks better than it used to look 20 years ago. And this is what my backyard looked exactly 20 years ago in September 2002. It was all covered with weedy grasses, and there was pretty much nothing in there. September 2022, this is a picture taken a week ago. It is not as attractive as you saw on the very first slide, but it's still reasonably okay. There is a little bit more brown than blue or yellow, but there is still plenty of green. Just to show a little bit more about what I had to deal with when I bought the house back in '96, this was my front yard. And this is my front yard a week ago. During spring, this front yard looks much better. Everything is green and blooming and developing. But of course, you need to like some of the seasonal changes if you are going to garden with no additional water. And one last blast from the past, side yard in September 2002, and the same side yard just a week ago. Incidentally, just about every plant that you see here is one of those that I'm going to be recommending for this type of gardening. Now, I am in San Jose, and most of that San Joaquin chapter is, the entire San Joaquin chapter is around Modesto and Turlock, as I understand. So one thing I thought was good to know is the comparison of what is the difference in climates, so that we can figure out whether what I'm talking about is even applicable to the area where everybody else is. The annual precipitation in Evergreen in San Jose is nowhere close to 17 inches as Calscape claims. It's really closer to 15. Summer precipitation, we have more or less the same in both areas. The coldest month, the difference is about 1 degree. The hottest month is a little bit more. The Central Valley is about 3 degrees hotter than what I see in my area. Humidity is close enough. So I'm hoping that the plants that I'll be talking about are going to do well in the area where you are. Now, looking at the conditions in the meadowlands in a little bit more detail, my backyard has southeast exposure with sun coming probably about an hour, maybe half an hour after the real sunrise, because I have hills to the east that delay the actual sunlight a little bit. I started with this was a new development. I started with bad soil. There were traces of serpentine in it, but generally it was completely stripped of any usable topsoil that was there, and all I have is clay. In winter, I have strong winds coming from the south, sometimes reaching 50 miles an hour. Also in winter, the bottom of my backyard can get rather wet because the hill is 30 feet above it, and everything that all rain that falls on the hill, a lot of it drains down all the way to the back. Average rainfall, as I said, is about 15 inches per year. Now, just to prove that I really don't water anything, this is my water usage. The local water company sends us every 2 months an information on how much water you have used versus efficient household and average household. And this is usage from this hottest part of last year, 2021. I don't have the bill for this year, but it's going to be similar. Now, one thing that I need to mention is how I planted everything that I'll be talking about. And my planting method is a little bit unusual, maybe. I dig a hole that is barely bigger than the pot in which the plant came. I buy everything in 1 gallon pots. Everything bigger is a waste of money. Most important part of it is to make this hole really wet and drain a lot of water so that it will percolate into lower layers. So I think 15 gallons is about what every plant gets before planting. And this can take a day or two to really do it. I wash off the top of the root balls and sides to get rid of the wick effect that otherwise would make this whole thing dry in no time. Mix the soil and make it into mud, stick the plant in the hole, cover everything with mud, excuse me, and that's it. I have a video and description of this method at the URLs that are shown at the bottom of the screen. I will post them into the notes later at the end. I don't have any easy way of posting them in the notes right now during the presentation. I would have to interrupt the presentation altogether. Okay, next is a little bit about, this is my main list of plants that I'll be talking about. And those are plants that, in my opinion, always look good. There is, I think, 10 different species here, flannel bush, 2 kinds of rose, sugar bush and lemonade berry, the couple of the plants that come from Channel Islands. There's a couple of plants that grow pretty much everywhere in California, and we'll get to them in one by one in a little moment, in a little while. So I'll start with the coyote bush, which occurs in most of the California, and it includes Modesto and Turlock area. Grows fairly quickly to about 10 feet tall and more, and just as wide. I have some of them that grew to maybe 14, 15 feet tall. If grown without watering, it requires some maintenance because occasionally branches die back and some small branches need to be trimmed because they also become leafless and look dead. So with a little work, however, it looks pretty good most of the year. Now, this is a very prolific seeder, and if you get one female plant, that's enough for pretty much any size garden, because that's how I started. I had one plant that was growing at the top of the hill, and now about, I would say, 30–40% of the area is covered with coyote brush. All right, I promised earlier that we'll talk about Fremontodendrons. This was at the top of the plants that always look good. There are three different kinds of Fremontodendrons that can be grown in California. There is a Mexican variety, Fremontodendron mexicanum. It occurs in Baja and in San Diego area, grows about 15 feet tall, 10 feet wide, and it assumes vase shape. Unfortunately, I cannot show this one because the specimen that I had managed to die after we had unusual 22 inches of rain in 2019-20 winter, so the poor thing just drowned. There is Fremontodendron californicum, which occurs in the foothills around Central Valley coast, and it should be, it grows in very many places and requires no water in summer. In fact, it will die if you water in the summer. There's also a variety of Fremontodendron decumbens, which is rare, grows at higher elevation, and I didn't manage to keep it alive, so that's not one that I would recommend for anything. Now, this photo that you're seeing is the Fremontodendron seen sometime in April, I think. And in the fall, it's still green, it still looks good. You have a lot, the brown stuff that you can see on the branches, those are just seed capsules, and they are going to drop off eventually. This particular plant was planted in 1998, so it survived now for over 25 years. I planted in the middle of the summer, which is better time for planting, but it didn't mind. On the next slide, we see another variety that is fairly popular. It's Fremontodendron San Gabriel. This is a picture when it is in full flower. And this was earlier this year in the spring. It was planted in 2004, so this one is about 16 years old. And right now, a week ago, it looked like this. So it's a little bit muted, and it's not as vibrant, of course. But the greenery is still there. One of my favorites is the Fremontodendron Eldorado Gold. This is a hybrid of Fremontodendron decumbens, that very rare one, and Fremontodendron California Glory, which is the one that you have seen in my background before the meeting started. And this one here is now 19 years old, and it looks perfectly fine still. Occasionally, it produces flowers that revert back to the type. So this is the kind of flower you can see on Fremontodendron decumbens, but I found this type of flower on a couple of branches of Eldorado Gold as well. And a week ago, this is Eldorado Gold. So it's perfectly happy, completely green, and looking good. Now, all of those varieties that I mentioned, they are not for small gardens. They all grow pretty big and wide. For smaller gardens, you can pick the variety called Ken Taylor, which this is another hybrid of Fremontodendron decumbens and Fremontodendron California Glory, but it's not as aggressive as Eldorado Gold. The flowers are more typical yellow. I haven't seen it produce the decumbens flowers that are deep orange. And this one grows fairly slow. It's not as fast as the others, and it can be kept in shape by trimming. So if you have space that's maybe 6 feet across, and it can be maintained in this area. I have also a couple of Fremontodendron californicum sorry about that. Couple of Fremontodendron californicum in my garden, and this is what I'm showing here is actually my first volunteer Fremontodendron that grew for me. About 4 years ago, I saw a seedling that looked like this. This is extreme close-up. And I pampered it for the next 4 years, and this produced not very big plant, maybe not particularly attractive. Who knows? You know, this is just a volunteer seedling. So let's go to the next one. This is what you saw in my background, Fremontodendron California Glory. I had a couple of them, but unfortunately I couldn't keep them alive. So it's not something that I would recommend, but it's interesting to see what is the parent of the two varieties that were shown before. Okay, we are done with flannel bushes. The next one that I wanted to share is sugar bush, Rus ovata. This photo is taken a week ago. So this is the current appearance. This thing just never looks bad. It always looks great. It can grow, however, very big. It can grow 30 feet tall and just as wide. It originates in the Southern California, in the area from Los Angeles to San Diego. And it's grows a little bit slower. It can grow fast if it gets additional water. With no additional water, it's not as fast. This one has been planted in 2002, so it's 20 years, and it's maybe 10 feet tall and 15 across. It's one plant that this plant responds well to pruning. So if you absolutely necessary need to bring it back into the smaller area, it can be cut back very hard, and it's not going to have much problems. At least the ones that I had to cut one pretty far back to almost all the way, some of the branches all the way to the trunk with scars, maybe 3-4 inches in diameter. Didn't create any problems, didn't kill the shrub. This is again the same Rus ovata, and this is also a picture taken a week ago, just to show how nice it looks at this time of year. During spring, it produces flowers, and here on the left, you can see the flowering with a bee that's busy pollinating it, and on the right, the berries that resulted from this. And the picture on the right is also from a week ago, and the buds for the future flowers right now, that's what they look like on the left. There is another genus in the Rus species that I like a lot, and this is lemonade berry, Rus integrifolia. Unfortunately, I don't have a good picture of this one in full flower, but it produces a lot of flowers, and some of it can be seen on the right. There is a close-up of what the flowers and leaves look like, and at the bottom on the right, you can see the profuse flower drop. It looks like pink snow sometimes under the bush when the petals drop from the plant. The next plant is somewhat unusual in the sense that it originates in the Channel Islands. So one wouldn't think that would be doing that great in our area. It's the island snapdragon, formerly known as Galvisia speciosa, and probably still available under this name in some nurseries. It does surprisingly well in light, and especially if it gets some afternoon shade, it looks perfect. There are several garden selections, and I have two of them. I have Firecracker, which is the one on the picture, and I have also Boca Rosa that I'm not going to be showing, but it looks also reasonably good. And selections look much better than just the straight species, which I also have, and also I'm not going to show because it's not as attractive as those two. Now the species itself is supposed to grow to 3 feet tall and 10 feet across, and this Firecracker is supposed to grow about 6 by 6. However, the one that I have, this was planted from 1 gallon back in 2002, so this is 20 years old, and after 20 years, it's probably about 7 to 8 feet tall, at least 8 feet across in one direction, probably 20 in the other. I'm not sure, maybe it's rooting and layering itself, but I haven't really looked under the bush recently, so I can't tell. It could be just as well that it's just a single big bush. The Boca Rosa variety is a little bit frost tender. I had 1 year when it died to the ground, but it resprouted and is doing perfectly fine now. In September, this is the look of the big bush that I was showing on the previous slide. It's got some minor dieback in a couple of things, and some of those branches that look a little bit dead are just because I have to shear this thing so that it will stay where it's planted, and rather than take over my house and my path that is from which I'm taking this picture. Even now in September, it still has some flowers. You can probably see one is here, the other is over here at the bottom. And that's the close-up of one of those flowers, again, taken last week. All right, my next favorite plant is Toyon, Heteromylus arbutifolia. This one is native through the western part of California and the Sierra foothills. It grows pretty much everywhere, and it grows and looks nice entire year. This picture here was taken probably in March, late March maybe, a couple years ago. There's Cyanotus in bloom, and the birds still haven't eaten all the berries. Now, yeah, there's one bird over there that's probably contemplating making a meal out of this. The birds disperse seeds of Toyon all over the place, and it volunteers profusely. I have several dozen in the backyard that I never planted. As always, I'm going to show you what it looks right now, and this is the picture from a week ago. It's perfectly green and looks good. If you look at the plant closely, there is no dieback of any kind. There are some old flowers that they were not pollinated. There are little berries that they're starting to develop. And as I mentioned, it volunteers all over the place. This is somewhere in the backyard, probably about, I don't know, 200 feet away from the mother plant, and somewhere in the shades, there are 3 volunteers of Toyon that popped up. And there you have another volunteer that's a little bit closer. This one started about 6 years ago, maybe. So it's growing on the slope with no water whatsoever. There is a variety that looks slightly different, Toyon Davis Gold, and with it's nice contrasting yellow berries, contrasting with the green foliage. Otherwise, the habit is and growth speed is about the same. It's not very quick to grow, but after a couple of years, it fills out. All right, next recommended variety, mountain mahogany, Cercocarpus betuloides. This plant is now 19 years old, and this is the picture taken in the spring, probably in late February or early March, and I can tell it by the Cyanotus blooms that are in the lower left and lower right. It grows to about 20 feet tall and 10 feet wide, but without additional water, it's a little bit slower. This one is probably about 12 feet tall only after 20 years. So if you don't water it too much, it's going to be much more maintainable. You can probably give it, some extra water to make it grow faster. In September, the same plant is on the left, and as I mentioned, it's green. And there are 2 more that are in a different part of the backyard that also have plenty of green leaves, and they look still good to me. And this is one that's volunteers, but even more than Toyon. And if you look here on the left, volunteer. There's plenty more volunteers on the steps, or rather there were before I managed to click and advance. Cercocarpus betuloides seeds are very feathery, and once they mature, they get blown by the wind everywhere. So I have this thing also volunteering all over the place. The seeds are very pretty. If you look at it in a close-up, it's a piece of art, I would say. So that's mountain mahogany. The next one is Catalina cherry, or holly leaf cherry rather, sorry. Prunus ilicifolia. This one occurs in coastal California from San Francisco Bay to San Diego, and it also does perfectly well in the land. It's very drought tolerant. With no extra water, it grows rather slowly, even though normally it's supposed to grow into a tree up to 45 feet tall. This one here is maybe 10 feet tall, grows without water, and you know, that's it's been planted 2005 or 2006, so it's about 15 years old, I would say. Average growth less than a foot per year, definitely. So the mother plant here that has all the berries, this is the plant that I planted. The one that you see here in front is the baby that you know, sprouted, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years ago, and it's slowly increasing in size. This one is also volunteering all over the place. The birds or maybe coyotes that eat the berries, or other animals that eat berries. I have sometimes California foxes live in my backyard, so I believe that they might be spreading them as well. I have this holly leaf cherry coming up also pretty much everywhere. This is one example where it's popped up in the shade under a large desert willow. Not desert willow. That's the Salix laciolepis. Forgot the common name. Sorry. Anyway, as I mentioned, the berries get eaten, and they get dumped, and they are spread all over the place. The leaves, when you look at them closely, they don't look very friendly, and they are sharp and pointy. So this is not a pleasant plant to touch. It might be a good barrier plant if necessary. There is a subspecies of Prunus ilicifolia that grows on Catalina Island and other Channel Islands, I believe, as well. And this one has similar habit, but the leaves are completely different. If you look at them closely, they don't look anywhere like the Prunus ilicifolia proper. But you know, I guess biology decided that their genetics is close enough that they are the same species, and it's only a subspecies. Okay, so returning to the cherries, if you keep them without water, they are probably quite okay for a small garden, and they will not grow too big in any reasonable time. As I said, 20 years, and they are maybe 10 feet across. Next, we go to buckwheats. In my opinion, the best looking buckwheat is the Eriogonum arborescens. It comes from Santa Cruz Island. It's in other Channel Islands. It's extremely drought tolerant. The plant that is shown here grows in reflected heat from the house. It grows to about 6 feet tall and 10 feet across, but it's rather slow. And I don't really seem to have photos of this plant without flowers. So I'll just show this one in flower. And the second one, this is what it looks right now in the backyard. The flowers turn slowly darker during summer, and finally they end up gorgeous brown. The seeds are getting eaten by birds who then again propagate them all over the place. So I have plenty of Eriogonum arborescens growing as volunteers. And depending on the location where they grow, the flower matures in the different speed. I'm not sure exactly why. It may be depending on the soil condition or amount of water they had. But those were here in early August, they were still quite white in appearance in the flowers. They just started turning reddish on the outside of the flowers itself. And all those flowers are, all those specimens are volunteers. Here's a couple more of them, just to show what they look like as at a different age. And those vary in age from maybe 2 years to 6 or 7. All the photos were taken on September 4th, 8 days ago. The next good and very recommended buckwheat is St. Catherine's lace, Eriogonum giganteum. This is this particular plant that you are seeing here is the one that I planted in my garden back in '98. So now it's 24 years old, and it layered itself. So from a single 1 gallon plant, I have now the hedge that is about 6 feet deep and maybe 15 feet across. It also originates in the Channel Islands, grows to about 5 feet tall. It's extremely drought tolerant. And right now, this is what it looks like. There's the Fremontodendron Pacific Sunset behind it, and in front, St. Catherine's lace with all flowers already turning russet. There's another one growing in another part of my yard. It's a little bit more covered with flowers than the other one, and some of them are still showing white, strangely enough. It volunteers just like the other one, volunteers all over the place. So those are some volunteers. There's more volunteers here. The one on the right is probably about 2 years old, so it hasn't started flowering yet. I expect it to start flowering maybe next year. And the third buckwheat that is maybe a little bit less recommendable because it doesn't look as good as the other ones in summer is California buckwheat. This one occurs from San Francisco Bay all the way down to San Diego. It grows in a lot of places in California. It's supposed to be up to 6 feet tall and 3 feet wide. The problem with this description is that the branches flop down and then they root, so the plant spreads quickly by layering itself. I planted only 2 of those, and I'll show you in a moment the photo of one of them. What happened from a 1 gallon plant after about 20 years is this big thicket of Eriogonum fasciculatum. This is early spring before it even started blooming. It's probably March, I think, maybe even earlier than that. It can be cut back severely, and if somebody doesn't look the way it looks in the summer, it can be cut to maybe 6-5 inches, and then it will sprout and grow green again when the rains come. Right now, the same location looks like this. So as I mentioned, it's not as great looking as the other 2, but for me, I tolerate it because I know that it's going to look fabulous when the rains come. And volunteers just as much as the others. This is a bunch of volunteers are here in the beginning. Sorry, in the front, this part, this is all Eriogonum fasciculatum, and I think there is the background is Eriogonum giganteum, and there is one more photo of maybe a little bit better of this volunteer on the lower left, showing how it is completely covered with flowers. I also have dwarf volunteer, which is something rather unusual. I haven't seen something like this in the trade. It grows only in my garden. It's about 6 inches tall, and that's it. And right now it looks like on the picture on the right, so it's rather ugly. But this is not the first year that I have seen it, and I fully expect that in the spring it's going to look like the one on the left. All right, done with the buckwheats. The next genus to talk about is those are oaks, and let's starting with valley oak, which is grows in many places in California. California, most majestic oak. It's fairly fast growing, although without any additional water, I don't see that the rate that is claimed of about 4 feet a year. I see maybe about half of that. This plant is deciduous. The leaves turn brown in the fall and eventually drop, but they persist on the tree for a couple of weeks, during which it looks a little bit worse than usual. In winter, however, the branches are very interesting to look at because they grow in a very contorted fashion. They look every which direction. The oak, like most oaks, this is a major food supplier for wildlife, for birds, for insects. And this oak is completely drought tolerant. I have not lost a single plant, and I have plenty of volunteers. This is the photo taken up the canopy of the oldest valley oak that I have. This is something that volunteered in my backyard about 21 years ago. And it's now about maybe 30 feet tall or so, maybe a little bit more than this. Some other specimens growing from among coyote bushes. There's one on the left, that's another valley oak. The one on the right I wanted to show because this one shows how it is sometimes getting invaded by parasitic wasps that create those galls that you can see. And those galls don't really harm the tree. It's just becomes nurseries for more wasps. And on the left, there is a close-up of some of them. And this particular tree is probably most densely covered with wasp galls in my backyard. The leaves, just to take a close up, they are deeply lobed, very green for all summer until they start falling down. Right now they are turning yellow, so this is one of the oaks that will provide a little bit of color in the fall, and then some of the leaves are already turning brownish. Eventually they will fall off and it will be fine. Now, if the deciduous oak is not up to somebody's liking, there is also the live oak, coast live oak. It grows south from Mendocino down all the way to LA. It's mostly east of Highway 5 with occasional excursions to the east of that. In my area of San Jose, it's very common on the hills. It grows, there are a lot of them, grows everywhere. It is slower growing than valley oak. This one, well, I'm not really sure about the age, probably about 15 years old and maybe 10 feet tall. There is another specimen here, slightly older. This one is maybe 20 years old and a little bit taller. The leaves are spiny and tough, and they don't fall until they are a couple years old, when some of them will turn brown and fall off. It also volunteers easily. I have several dozen of them growing. I planted one, but it volunteers mostly from the wood mulch that I got from the arborists. I guess some of the loads that I received must have been from oaks, and there must have been acorns in there, and now I have a couple dozen of coast live oaks. The next nice oak, it's canyon live oak, Quercus chrysolepis. This one is also evergreen, and natural range of it is California, north and south, almost all the way to Nevada. It grows almost everywhere except in Central Valley, but I'm not sure that there is any reason why it shouldn't be planted there, because it should, if it grows fine in my backyard, it should grow fine also there. The young trees, this one is kind of interesting because the young trees have leaves with spiny leaves, and older trees have leaves with smooth edges. And sometimes during the transition from young to old, you can see that this different kinds of leaves occur on the same branch. So this is a close-up of one of the branches of this particular specimen, where you can see the spiny leaves right here on the right, and then the same branch, nice smooth edges on the left. So that's kind of nice and unusual. Quercus chrysolepis is also known as golden cup oak. The acorn cups are golden in color. Grows a little bit slower than coast live oak, and the specimen that I showed you is about 19 or 20 years old and maybe 12 feet tall. That's all. Okay, if you want a small oak, there is nothing probably better than the leather oak. This one is extremely slow growing. It likes serpentine soils and usually doesn't exceed 15 feet. Now, 15 feet in my backyard, this is going to take probably another 170 years if it's going to keep the rate of growth that it had for now. The one that I shown here, it's 16 years old. It never got any supplemental water, and that's what happened to it. It's basically a nice, dense bonsai oak that is perfectly happy the way it is, and it's surviving. Well, it's actually, looking at the amount of the new growth on the leaves, I could say it's thriving. That's a close-up of new leaves that are kind of pale, very pale green. All right, another deciduous oak that might be worth trying out is blue oak. That's also a fairly slow growing. It's deciduous. I don't really have a good photo of this specimen because it's surrounded by coyote bushes, and it grows probably less than 1 foot a year, but can grow to 80 feet tall. So it's also something that may be considered to be planted in the garden that is not too big, and it will do fine in it for a number of years until it becomes too much of it. And the last oak, it's another transplant from the Channel Island, Quercus tomentella. You got fuzzy undersides of the leaves. Sorry about it. I should have really taken a picture of underside of those leaves. It's fairly fast growing. It's just about as fast as the live coast oak. And it's evergreen, doesn't drop leaves. So it's looks nice all year round. And my last oak, Quercus garryana, also known as Gary's oak or Oregon oak. This is the oak with most beautiful flowers of all the oaks that I have seen in California. They are really bright, almost phosphorescent green, and in the spring, just after they unfold. This is deciduous oak. The natural range for this one is all over California. It's from a bit north of Los Angeles all the way to Oregon, and past Oregon, past Washington to British Columbia. It grows fairly moderate or slow rate, can reach 90 feet after a while. And as I said, that the reason that I really like it is this color of green leaves in the spring. In the spring, the spring photo of this full specimen is on the left. This is the same on the right, same specimen picture taken yesterday. We had much dry summers for the last 2 years. We had about, in 2 years, we had about the total average rainfall that normally should be here in 1 year. So I'm a little bit afraid about it. I'm not sure it can be recommended because it looks a little bit unhealthy to me this year, but I have seen something similar in past years, except maybe in October and not in early September. So this is questionable as a little bit questionable as a plant for no water garden, especially in drought conditions. The next tree is the Fremont poplar or Fremont cottonwood. This tree is actually the natural range goes from Redding all the way south and just from off the Pacific coast all the way to Sierra foothills, including most of the Central Valley. So this is something that you should be able to grow in your area, but there is a big caveat here. It really needs to get its roots to the water table. And this is going to become in a moment evident why. Now this plant here is 19 years old, and the trunk on the right that you can see on the right is probably 2.5 feet across, maybe more. The bucket that you see there, this is 5-gallon bucket for comparing the width of the trunk. To be really happy, it requires a lot of water, but if it reaches the water table, it will dig its roots in there, and then it will be happy all the time. This picture here is probably sometime in August. Right now, it's starting to turn color a little bit. I don't have picture from yesterday. Now, this one grows at the bottom of the hill, so it's getting all the water runoff from the hill, the part of the garden that gets really moist in winter. And I guess this water percolates down, and that's what's keeping this poplar or cottonwood alive. I have 2 specimens of this species. This is another one that grows on the other side of my backyard. It's maybe about half the size of the other one. This one turned to be multi-trunked, but the trunk is still quite solid. What you see here is mostly the effect of the growth in the last 2 or 3 years when we had much more rainfall than usual. 3 years ago, we had about 18 inches of rainfalls. 2 years ago, it was 22 inches. And this is when this guy really took off, because until then, it was probably half the size that you can see here. Oh, for comparison, the fence is about 7 feet tall. The difference between this and the previous one and this one is grows on the location that is 6 feet higher than the other one, and that's it. Otherwise, the conditions are identical. They are growing about 90 feet apart from each other. All right, done with trees, done with buckwheats, time for some Ceanothus. Now, Ceanothus, not all of the species are going to grow well without supplemental water. In my experience in my backyard, there's a group of Ceanothus in the subgenus Cerastis that grows much better than the subgenus Ceanothus itself. From the subgenus Ceanothus is the one that you've typically seen in nurseries, the Ceanothus terciflorus, griseus, Yankee Point. Those are all from the subgenus Ceanothus. Most of them require some supplemental water, and they don't seem to be doing too well if you stop watering. In fact, a lot of them died in my backyard. I keep some alive, but I don't really pay much attention to them anymore. And there are 2 species that are probably possible to recommend, and then 2 species that are definitely recommendable for a garden with no water. From the subgenus Cerastis, the difference is that the leaves in this subgenus, the leaves are tough, they are thick, they are typically spiny a little bit, but they are much better adapted to dry conditions. So let's go through some of them. Ceanothus cuneatus, that's a bugbrush. It's native to most of California, except Central Valley, sorry about this. And grows reasonably quickly to about 10 feet tall and wide, and has very pleasant and sweet fragrance. The seed capsules dry out and then explode. which the botanical term for it is, is what I really like to say sometimes. And the seed capsules are explosively dehiscent. Very, very nice description. And because of this, you know, in the chaparral with a lot of this type of cyanotus growing around in the season when the seeds are maturing, you can sometimes hear a faint rain, which are basically the seeds exploding and being propelled and hitting things around, even though there is full sun and not a cloud to be seen. And that's one of the features of this species. Since it shoots its seeds all over the place, of course, I have a bunch of volunteers, and some of the volunteers grow better than the mother plant that was shown in the previous one. This one in particular is particularly floriferous and got a lot of lots of white flowers on it. It looks reasonably good in the fall. This is the picture from last weekend. Sorry about those salvia stalks in the front that don't allow me to really show, but there is there are no dead leaves on this cyanotus at all. It's perfectly happy. Some more volunteers to show off. I haven't planted any single one of those guys. All right, next cyanotus. This is something that, well, it's very difficult to find, so it cannot be really recommended. It's fairly small, slow growing. It's endemic to the small area south of San Jose. I just wanted to show it because this is one of the plants that also grows fine without any additional supplemental water, but it's pretty much impossible to find it other than maybe on occasional CNPS sales. And it probably should be grown more in the area close to where it originated from, rather than trying to grow it elsewhere. I just wanted to show it as an interesting species. It's rare and endangered. Next two species of cyanotus that I would recommend is Rigidus and Maritimus. There are a lot of cultivars of them. Cyanotus rigidus, its natural range is maybe 2,000 miles from the coast, from Santa Cruz to Lompoc. And I haven't seen the regular species anywhere in the trade, but there is a cultivar called the Snowball, which is the one on the left. And it grows perfectly happy without summer water. The one on the right is another of the surprising transplants from the coast. This is Cyanotus maritimus. Natural range is just a couple of miles on the coast near the Hearst Castle. So this is a super rare plant, also very rare and endangered, but it has plenty of cultivars in the thread, in the trade. And in my garden, it does surprisingly well without any additional watering. And the cultivars that are particularly good are Valley Violet, Popcorn, Frosty Dawn, and Dr. Laser Dark Blue. The one shown here on the right is Dr. Laser Dark Blue. And there is another specimen of Dr. Laser Dark Blue over here. And the straight species of Cyanotus maritimus from CNPS plant sale that's less attractive, but it's also perfectly happy. I would stay with the named cultivars. They seem to be doing much better. As I mentioned, I have plenty of volunteers, and some of them are hybrids of unknown origin. So this one here is Cyanotus maritimus, possibly crossed with Cuniatus. It's this plant changes color from light purple to almost white, and that's a snapshot of it. That's another one of the same kind. With Cyanotus, sometimes the seeds, capsules grow particularly big, especially on the Cyanotus megacarpus, and they look very attractive for the short period before they turn black and then explode. I mentioned Valley Violet. This is Valley Violet here on the in front on the in front of the photo. This is photo taken last week, and there's some of the what seems to be the dead branches there. Those are really leftover Clarkias that I haven't had patience to pull out from the ground. So never mind those. The plant itself looks pretty good at this time of year. Cyanotus maritimus popcorn, that's another variety that I mentioned before. This one is in full bloom. This one is particularly long blooming. Last year, it started in January and finished in April. It doesn't always have full flowers like this, but there is always something white somewhere on this plant for about 4 months. And right now, it looks a little bit used up, but it's going to pop alive again once the rains come. That's another Dr. Laser Dark Blue. This is a smaller plant, 2 years in the ground, maybe 3 years in the ground. And this is picture taken yesterday, I think. So it looks perfectly happy, and there's a little bit of close-up of the leaves, what they look like. Cyanotus megacarpus, the big pot cyanotus. This one is native to Los Angeles area to San Diego. It's moderately fast growing with upright habit, and it's super drought tolerant. I have 2 of them, and both of them were planted once, watered and forgotten, and they are survivors. They are impossible to kill. It grows fairly narrow, so it may be good for small gardens, but it can grow to probably 10 feet tall or so. And that's a picture of what it looks like right now. You can see on the left that the leaves have turned away from the sun. The leaves are different color on both sides. The top is green, the bottom is light green and more reflective. So this one is saving itself from getting too dry. And just like every other Cerastis species, this one also volunteers in my backyard profusely. So I have some suspected hybrids of Cuniatus and Megacarpus. The blooming season of those 2 species overlaps a little bit. Megacarpus is earlier, Cuniatus is a little bit later. The hybrids that I'm talking about grow, they flower in between. So they flower later than Megacarpus, earlier than Cuniatus. That's my main clue why I suspect that this might be a hybrid of both of them. The next Cyanotus that grows without any summer water is Cup-leaf Cyanotus, Cyanotus perplexans. This is also this is something that grows in San Diego area and also in Sequoia National Forest. It's fairly slow growing. It's very drought tolerant, and part of the distribution of this Cyanotus is actually fairly close to Death Valley. So I guess this would go together with the drought tolerance. And that's a close-up of the leaves that show the cup shape. So I would call it maybe spoon-shaped. And the same plant on the right, right now, this was a week ago with some buckwheat on the right. I think it's St. Catherine's lace in flower. All right, the next one. Now, the caption that you see here, this is my attempt to use artificial intelligence to understand when I speak Latin name and try to transcribe it into text. So the actual caption was Cyanotus spinosus. That's a greenbark Cyanotus. It occurs in coastal areas from San Luis Obispo to San Diego and also east to San Bernardino National Forest. So it's from the south of California. Grows moderately fast to about 20 feet tall and wide. It has pleasant fragrance on the flowers. And this is one plant that absolutely should have no water in summer. I had 3 of them, and I actually managed to kill the first 2 by being too nice to them the first year after planted. I watered them in summer because I thought they needed it, and they died promptly after that. Usually, I usually try to water the plants the first year to get them established. This one really didn't need it. The plant that you are seeing here is the one that was planted in a little bit of partial shade, and this one will look better. Didn't seem like it was dying, so I left it alone, didn't water it, and now, 15 years later, this is what it is. It's on the right is again the way it looks right now. The yellow one in the back here, this yellow part here, this is coast live oak starting to turn yellow, or maybe it's the big leaf maple. I am not sure. I have 2 of them there, and both of them are turning yellow at this time. Okay, a close up of the green bark Cyanotus flowers. And this is why it's called green bark. The bark is different color than most of the other Cyanotus. It also shows the spines. So like here and here, and this one here, and then this one here, and this one here. So this is where the Latin name comes from. Last Cyanotus to show is Cyanotus tomentosus. That's a woolly leaf Cyanotus. It occurs in 2 locations in California. One is in Sierra Nevada, and there the species has hairy leaves. Another is in the Los Angeles to San Diego area, and this one has leaves without hairs. It used to be called in the past variety olivaceus, and that's what I have here. But recently, the taxonomists merged them both into the same group, even though appearance is very different. This one is partially summer deciduous, so it drops some leaves in summer and should not be watered in summer, even if it starts dropping leaves. This is what it looks right now in my backyard yesterday. Oh, so this was not the last Cyanotus I was going to talk about. The next one is Cyanotus cyaneus. That's the lakeside Cyanotus or San Diego Cyanotus. It grows naturally near San Diego. It has gorgeous dark flower with pleasant scent. Grows reasonably quickly to about 15 feet tall. This one, the only reason I'm not recommending it right away is that 2 years ago it died on me, and I completely attribute it to this unusual rain that we had when we had 22 inches of rain in the season, which basically flooded the lower areas of my backyard, and I think this one became a victim of it. Close up of the flowers at the top. The flowers are held high above foliage, really showing off. And the color of the flower is dark purple. It's really nice darker than most other Cyanotuses. This one's going to be the last one. This is another surprise Cyanotus that survives for me without watering, but it's not something that I would feel comfortable recommending, because this one grows in a planter that is fairly deep and has reasonably good soil, but it grows without any water. This is an island Cyanotus from the Channel Islands, and grows fairly fast, can reach about 30 feet, but mine is only about 16 feet tall, maybe because I'm not watering it. And it's very prolific cedar. I have volunteers all growing all around it. And in fact, what you see here in the front, this is not part of the main Cyanotus. Main Cyanotus is the one in the back. This is one of the volunteers. This is one of the volunteers. There's probably about 5 of them growing in front. And they grow in several inches of bark mulch that is on top of compacted base rock and heavy clay under the compacted base rock. So how is this thing getting any water and surviving? I have no idea, but it does survive. It's a very prolific bloomer, and when the petals start dropping on this is when most of the petals are still on the shrub, but you can see that it looks almost like snow underneath. All right, we are getting close to the end of the of the allocated time, and I still have 50 more slides to go. So I'm wondering whether I should stop here or should I continue? Let me get out of the presentation mode for a moment and ask for the feedback, because if I keep.
You know what? I think what we actually have we have an unbelievable number of people still in the audience. It has kind of gone down by about 40 people or even more. I think we might want to leave them and probably bring you back for another round at some point, if that would work.
Yeah, that would work.
Because I've also got questions for you. Or,
yes.
You know,
yeah, I kept talking and I completely forgot about the time, and I see, okay, it's 8:21. Time to wind down with this whole thing. All right, so let's me see what questions do we have. Let's see, chat. Oh boy, 99 messages in
I wrote a few of them down. Let me see if I can get back to them.
Okay, I'll try to look at them from the.
There was somebody was asking about removal of a weedy yard with Bermuda grass. Do you have any idea on that? Have you ever had to deal with Bermuda grass?
I never had to deal with it, but this is one of the nasty plants that I know that even people who don't like pesticides, they would just round up the whole thing. Otherwise, you have to dig fairly deeply down and basically run the soil through some kind of sieve and try to get all the rhizomes out. So I didn't have to deal with it. I am lucky in this respect. Probably solarizing the soil for a while and letting it. You would have probably to put 2 years of solarizing it through 2 summers. Maybe this would kill it, but I wouldn't guarantee it. So, but as I said, I didn't need to deal with it. I'm just repeating what I've heard from other people.
Andrea said, I'd like to replace Mexican sage with something that doesn't get so leggy and dried out. It's on a slight decline behind a retaining wall. Did you have any ideas for her?
For Mexican sage,
I heard
it. If you want something that is about the same size and not too fast growing, some of the manzanitas might be a good idea because they stay green all year. There is manzanita, the species is Arctostaphylos densiflora, and the cultivar that is not too big is Harmony. It's fairly slow growing though. This is something that is in the part of the presentation that I didn't get to.
I guess Rosa has problems with, well, they're not really problems, but when her goats get out, they come up. She's wondering about if you haven't, she's worried about her goats eating her native plants. Do you have any advice for her?
No advice for goats, sorry. I know that, I don't know if goat resistance is how much related to the deer resistance, because deer are a problem also for many people. And for deer, salvias, deer don't like salvias, they don't like the spiny kind of Cyanotuses. They will love the Cyanotus from the subgenus Cyanotus, like, you know, the Carmel creeper or Yankee point. Those get eaten very easily because they have nice juicy leaves. Anything with leaves that are not pleasant to munch on, they should do fine. Let's see, from some species that are really unpleasant to eat. Oh, I don't think that anything would eat Berberis nevinii. This is the barberry with very spiny leaves and yellow flowers and yellow berries. It looks really pretty, does well without too much water. I don't have a slide of this of this guy, but you know, I could probably put it in the next installment. this is a plant that I don't think there is an animal that will eat it. Maybe a camel, if you had it here, since
I don't
they
think we're too worried about camels.
Yeah.
Carrie says is looking for pruning advice for the 3 Aragoniums. How far back can we take them safely?
Oh, for the 3 buckwheats, the Eriogonum fasciculatum, this one can be pruned very hard, almost all the way to the ground. I cut a couple of specimens to 6 inches just for an experiment, and they resprouted, and they were very happy. They didn't mind it at all. Eriogonum giganteum, the St. Catherine's lace, it can be cut a little bit back, but you always need to remember to leave some growth. You don't cut it down to a bare branch. You should leave at least 2 or 3 sets of leaves that will start sprouting. I generally don't prune anything, and you know, that's so I can't advise too much. I pruned only a couple of places where the plant started encroaching over a path that I cannot move. Generally, my approach to plant overgrowing the space, let's say if I have a plant that grows over a path, if I can move the path, I will move the path and leave the plant alone. I try to not prune anything unless I really have to. Eriogonum arborescens, the one that I showed first, this one, I don't think it needs any pruning. Just put it in a place where it's not growing, where you have 6 feet of space, and don't water it, and it will stay there.
How has a question you might be able to answer? Does anybody know how large Chris's backyard is?
1 acre.
He said so much of this is massive growth, and he says he's more interested in city plants because he's in a large home in a subdivision. But you're also looking for, you know, trying to get stuff without irrigation too. So
yes, for smaller plants. There are a couple that I mentioned that I think would be good for a smaller garden. That's Eriogonum arborescens was the first one because it doesn't grow super big. Cyanotus megacarpus, that would be another one that I think might work well. Cyanotus maritimus, those are small plants. They don't grow more than about 3-4 feet across. So all of the species of Cyanotus maritimus will do fine, and some of them are supremely drought tolerant, especially the valley violet. And they can take a little bit of additional water if they look too bad, but any watering should be done far away from the root ball, and maybe somewhere along the drip line if you don't want to kill them. So
sorry.
Yeah, Cyanotus maritimus, Eriogonum arborescens, Cyanotus megacarpus, and let me think what else. If you have a little bit space for Fremontodendron cantillor, this is another plant that can be kept easily within about 6 feet across. What else I talked about? The trees, of course not. The lemonade berry and sugar bush, way too big. Galvisia speciosa, this is another one that responds well to pruning. So if you have a space of about 6 feet across and plop it in the middle, you can keep it within bounds by pruning.
Eleni said for the fasciculatum.
Yes.
Would you prune back the dead-looking growth over the summer, fall to let it grow full and green in spring?
You can prune it, or you can leave it and it will turn green again.
And then Brian was asking if Coke Orc is negative. We burst his bubble and told him it wasn't. But I have a question about the oaks. You didn't mention interior live oak, and I was curious if there was a
Uh,
reason why.
Well, the reason why is that I don't have it in my backyard.
Okay.
So I was just talking about plants that I can vouch for because of the experience how they grew for me.
Well, interior live oak is actually native right in San Joaquin County. So I just want to point, and it is available in some nurseries. So I just wanted to point that out.
Maybe I should try growing one of those.
Yeah.
But then another presentation in 20 years after I know what it did.
There you go. Rosa asked, could you display the list of plants displayed in the beginning when possible? These are great ideas.
Yes. This is something I was going to do, and I just need to move this a little bit. So I'll be looking to the side to another monitor for a moment.
All right.
Sorry about that. Okay, so this is just the list of genera, but I can prepare the entire list and maybe
Another thing we can do is just send everybody who registered. Do you think, Cynthia, we might be able to send everybody who registered a list?
Okay, so this is the main list that I showed in the beginning. And the other thing that I promised to send is the links.
Properly help you.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Cynthia. We've got everyone's email because you registered, and we can follow up with this information.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
so I want to jump in for a minute, Mike. So our time is up, but if KK is willing to stay, we can keep, are you willing to keep answering questions? Because there was a lot of questions. We didn't get to them all.
Well, I can answer questions. Yes, sure. I'm not really up to continuing the presentation, I think, but let's deal with that.
No. Well, everyone has agreed that we need you to come back and finish it as a separate presentation. I just want to thank you so much for being here and talking to us about something that's just incredibly important to everyone now throughout the state. You didn't really talk a little bit. Let me just ask you a question. When you say with no watering, does that mean that you don't water them at all, or do you water them at the beginning?
I water them in the beginning, and so basically the regime for it, I try to plant them in fall or middle of the winter, and then they until the rains stop, there is no watering involved there, because they should be able to survive on those 15 gallons of water that I poured into the hole before planting. And by the way, this is done by filling a 5-gallon bucket with a small pinhole at the bottom and letting the water drip into the hole for several hours. Since all I have is clay, there is no prayer of filling of dumping 15 gallons from the hose. It needs to be done really slowly. So basically, they don't get any water until spring, and in the spring they get maybe water twice a week. Then maybe May and June, not twice a week, once every 2 weeks. Well, this was a big misspoken. So every 2 weeks they get some water. Then it goes into 3 weeks apart in May and June, and then they get watered once in July and August, maybe September, and then the rains start generally in October. So from this point on, that's it. If I see that some plants are struggling, I may give them additional water the second year. But I don't want anything to be too dependent on the watering. So if the plant doesn't survive, well, that's just lesson learned, and don't plant it again, or plant it in a location where it may be happier, or maybe plant it instead of full sun, plant it with morning sun only, or maybe completely in the shade. Oh, I see a question that, how did I prepare my previously weedy yard for planting natives? About 3 years of running lawnmower up and down the hill every weekend. So what I showed there was a lot of native grasses, and I started effective basically by running a lawnmower over the entire thing, rototilling some areas where the infestation was too much, starting with small areas and mowing the rest, and just keeping the weeds from reoccurring. This was ongoing fight until a couple years ago. Last winter, very few weeds. I maybe picked 2 wheelbarrows worth of weeds from this entire acre, and in the past years I had multiple cubic yards of weeds hauled out. How hot are my heat waves? Well, last week it had 113, but it was only one day, and it wasn't as bad as, let's say, in what Frank asked, 105 to 115 for 5 or more days. I don't remember this type of weather, but we do hit over 100 several times a year. This year was surprisingly mild. It's only in September, but I remember in the past there were days with maybe not 115, but 104, 108 maybe in peaks, and that lasted now and for a couple of days. Mm-hmm.
Someone was asking, do your plants spread to your neighbor's yard? It looks like he waters quite a bit.
Well, the only thing that's really spread is coyote brush, because this one has fuzzy seeds that travel large distances, and my neighbors don't really do anything in their backyards. They just hire somebody to whack the weeds once they have gone to seed, and that's it. And next year it start again. So other than the coyote brush, nothing else really. And also the problem is that when they whack the backyards, they do it all the way to the ground. So anything that might have germinated there gets killed.
Well, I see a lot of people saying that they're looking forward to part 2, and also there are a lot of people just seconding the idea of interior live oak, that they're good plants.
Yeah, I'm looking at a little bit more.
We do have somebody with their hand up. Should we just ask them to type in chat, or are you okay with the idea of having them come out and on the...
Mike, I tried to chat with that person, but they didn't respond.
Okay.
Maybe we can enable people to ask questions directly.
Yeah, actually good.
Let me see any more. Okay, there are some other questions I see. What's your favorite no-water manzanita? That's probably Arctostaphylos densiflora. This is a fairly rare species, and the ones that I like is Howard McMean and Harmony, that I think I mentioned in response to somebody else. Also, Big Berry Manzanita, Arctostaphylos glauca. So those would be my favorites. Do I use any sages? Plenty. And this is in the part that didn't get aired. This is in the favorite sages, like Salvia leucophylla, Salvia munzii, Those are my best drought tolerant ones. Salvia bis bliss. Okay, on shorter plants, yeah, this would be, somebody says I would like a session on shorter plants. I have some shorter ones in the second part, but okay, not here. Coastal San Diego, what would I say? Sandy soil, alkaline sandy soil. I have alkaline clay, so I'm not really sure what to recommend for sandy soil. Okay, what other categories of plants I recommended? Let me look at the rest of my presentation.
Well, we might just say wait for part 2 because
salvias. I'm looking at the salvias. It's mostly salvias. Some grasses, some ribes. Yeah. Yeah, there.
Manzanitas?
Sorry?
Some manzanitas?
Some manzanitas, yeah, plenty of, several manzanitas. I don't grow too many manzanitas, so maybe, maybe I'm not that as experienced in them as with Cyanotus. I'm still looking at. Oh yeah, I see somebody confirmed that Cyanotus spinosus is very sensitive to summer water. Don't water them at all, never ever. Valley violet, yep, the valley violet should work. Yeah, the complete list of plants that I have actually can be seen on the gngt.org website. If you go and look at the gardens, if you look at for Meadowlands garden, there is a plant list there of everything that I had back in 2016. Now it has a little bit changed. Okay, let's see what else is that I could answer. I see a lot of thanks, and I don't know if I missed anything. Have you grown Ione buckwheat? No. I don't have any experience with this. I'm not sure I even heard of it. Okay, I scrolled through most of the chat, and I hope I answered everything. If somebody has a question that I didn't answer, just please unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, I've made it so I think you can unmute yourself, but we're kind of new to this, so if that's not working, put it in the chat.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't you guys can just jump in and start talking? Can you? Don't have something to say?
I had gone ahead and lowered Anonymous's hand because we were trying to talk to him, and I'm not even sure he's there now. So I wrote to him and just said you can put it in chat, but if anybody wants to unmute, you can go ahead and ask your question. I think it's 8:43, so I don't want to deliberately just keep extending.
Okay.
At some point we're good. I think we ought to just go ahead and bring it to a close myself.
Yeah, okay.
And we'll get ready for another.
How can I send a donation question? Well, the best donation is done to CNPS. If you and CNPS allows you to donate to specific chapters, so you know either I think since this was organized by by your chapter, that should be the default chapter for the donation. Or if somebody wants to donate extra to Santa Clara Valley chapter, that would be appreciated too. But if you go to cnps.org, there is a place there to donate, and you can direct donations to any chapter you want. Yeah, North San Joaquin Valley chapter is the primary choice for the donation right now, because
Right, because we thank you for I know you're from the Santa Clara Valley chapter, but thank you very much for speaking at our chapter. So yeah, we are going to close it off.
I'm not saying instead. I'm saying in addition.
Don't die.
Oh, okay. By the way, you can always belong to more than one chapter, so you can join our chapter and the Santa Clara Valley chapter. In fact, I belong to both of those chapters. So we're going to stop, but I just want to thank KK again for this fantastic talk. It was kind of a fire hose amount of information, but we did record it, and we'll post the link on our Facebook page because that's the only place we have right now to post things. So do you have any last words of wisdom or advice or inspiration to everyone, KK?
Well, grow only natives. Don't bother with anything else. That's been a mantra for years. They survived both heat and cold much better. Actually, one of the my first experience that turned me into natives was that back in 97, I think, or 98, just after I started gardening, we had a frost that was fairly severe. And basically all the Mediterranean stuff died, all the native stuff survived. So this was a clue.
Okay, so the meeting's over. Everyone can hang out here if you want to, but I'm going to turn off the recording.
All right.
Figure out how to do that. And thank you so much again.
No, you're welcome. Pleasure.